name is Barbara Nissman, and I am speaking to you from my studio here in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. I wish I were speaking to you from the stage, but hopefully that will happen soon. But in the meantime, I thought it would be fun to share with you the music of everybody's favorite piano composer, and I am talking about Frederic Chopin. Now, this is a man who never wrote a symphony, he never wrote an opera. He only wrote for the piano. Actually, he did write a cello sonata because he had a friend who was a cellist and a piano trio. But other than that, and actually the orchestral accompaniment for his two piano concertos were quite sparse in terms of giving the orchestra something to do, but they were perfect to feature the piano. And that's what Chopin loved. He was a pianist first and foremost, and he had a very, very special voice. He loved the instrument and he wrote like nobody else. And he was born in Warsaw, and of course his talent was discovered at a young age and supported by his parents, by his teachers, even by the aristocracy. And the plan was to have this young genius go off and see the world and share his talents with the world. So he went off to Vienna and then landed in Paris, which was really the center of culture in the age of Romanticism. And here Chopin was surrounded by poets, writers, painters, composers, and people such as Victor Hugo, Balzac, the German poet Heinrich Heine, who of course was a great fan of Chopin and wrote extensively about him, and the painter Delacroix. This man was responsible for that wonderful portrait that we see on the covers of a lot of the Chopin publications. So perhaps you've seen that painting. And of course, the pianists. There was Franz Liszt, there was Kalkbrenner, there was Hiller, Mendelssohn, and the opera composer Meyerbeer, to name a few. And Chopin really flourished in this environment. In fact, frequently you could find him in the evenings at the opera, very elegantly dressed, because clothes were very important to Chopin. And maybe the writer George Sand would be on his arm. Now, she was quite a liberated lady for the 19th century, and they were quite an item. But Chopin loved opera, and he loved the great singers. This was the age of bel canto, the operas of Bellini and Donizetti, and it is this style that Chopin imitates at the piano. In other words, he wants the pianist to stop playing that percussive instrument we're playing, where the hammers hit the strings. He wants us to pretend that we are great singers and to sing out of the piano. And of course, this is what he did when he played his compositions. Now, he was also a great improviser, and people say he could go on for hours and hours just improvising on a Polish folk tune. So this style of improvising at the moment is really what the pianist also has to bring to his music. Even though we practice his music and try and just get it as best as we can, that element that we're just making it up at the moment as we play it should be there with a lot of warmth, a lot of rubato, which means freedom to carry the line. So let me show you what I mean. I think it's easier if I show you with this beautiful nocturne that might be familiar to some of you in E flat, and you can see what I'm talking about. So Chopin presents this beautiful melody. Vary it. In other words, he will embroider it, add trills, add a few turns. You'll see what I mean. And then he'll give you a contrasting section. So you see what I mean about variation and improvisatory style. And I'm sure that when Chopin played this nocturne, it was never played the same way. And I remember the first time I heard this, I was a little girl and I was at the movies and I was looking up at the screen, and this very handsome film star by the name of Tyrone Power, maybe some of you remember him, was playing this nocturne on the piano, and the movie was the Eddie Duchin story. So maybe some of you saw that as well. But let me share with you another old favorite from my childhood, the Fantasy Impromptu. I know this might be familiar to some of you. And I remember the first time I heard it, and when I looked at the music, I was a bit daunted because the left hand was playing 6 notes, and the right hand was playing 8. And when I looked at the music, I wondered how that went together, but I finally did figure it out. And the middle section might be familiar to some of you because you will hear the popular song, I'm Always Chasing Rainbows, but remember, Chopin wrote it first. It became popular way after he wrote the Fantasy Impromptu. So here is the Fantasy Impromptu. And you can understand why that is a popular favorite. Actually, it's been fun for me because I remember playing this in high school, and it's been fun to just pull it out because every time, of course, it's different, and a lot of years have passed. And that's the wonderful thing about making music. We keep rediscovering, we rediscover ourselves too at the same time as rediscovering this wonderful composer. And Chopin actually left a wonderful legacy for pianists. Oh, he wrote so many works in his short lifetime of 39 years. And he also wrote two sets of etudes, Opus 12 and Opus 25, 12 in each. And these really laid the foundation for piano technique. In fact, every single serious pianist has studied these etudes. And he raised the artistic level of the etude because when Czerny wrote his etudes or Kramer, they were just technical exercises. With Chopin, in addition to pursuing one technical problem in each of them, they became musical gems. And I'd like to play for you one of my favorites, the Revolutionary. But before I do, let me say something else about what Chopin did for piano playing. He also changed the color sense. And I mean, his pedaling techniques really changed the way we approach the instrument. Even his fingering techniques, allowing the thumb on the black key. So he really revised everything. And those harmonies he wrote were so bold at the time. And even today, they sound so modern. You're really surprised sometimes when you analyze his music. But let's go back to the Revolutionary. This is another piece I played in high school. And the story goes that when Chopin was living in Paris, and of course because of the political turmoil in Poland, he was unable to return to his country. So upon hearing the news that the Russian troops had invaded his homeland, the story goes, it might be myth, but it's a great story, that he sat down at the piano and wrote this Revolutionary etude, and the left hand, you'll hear there's a lot of work the left hand's doing, is the sound of the horses, trampling through Polish soil. So here is the Revolutionary etude, and I must say that the right hand is doing its share of work as well. loved his homeland and he loved his family, and the tragedy of Chopin's life truly was that he could never return because of the political situation. It was just not safe for him to come back from Paris. But the homeland was in his soul, and he wrote so many pieces that were influenced by Poland. He wrote many mazurkas based on the Polish dance, and a wonderful set of polonaises. Now, the polonaise was a majestic processional, and I want to play for you the A-flat polonaise, but let me say one more thing about Chopin and his relation to Poland. He really yearned for his country, and I've read just recently that some of his happiest moments when he was living in Paris was when he could reconnect with those old Polish friends who visited and speak his native language. And when he died in Paris, he was buried in a cemetery there, and his heart was then removed and taken back to his homeland, where it still rests. And the Polish, of course, consider Chopin a national hero, and rightly so. His music is always heard, played on the radio, and he never lost his love of country or his love of family. Now, the Polonaise in A-flat is one of my favorites. It's nicknamed the Heroic Polonaise, and it's certainly heroic. And maybe some of you recognize this melody. It also was made into a popular song, Till the End of Time, and of course that was stolen definitely from Chopin. And in the middle section there's, which is quite difficult for the pianist because we have to play octaves. Let me give you some idea of this. This, again, it might be myth, but it's a great story, and it's plausible. This is depicting the battle between the Polish and the Russian troops, and Chopin is making you hear the horses and the hooves, galloping along. So you might want to remember that, but you don't need to remember that to enjoy this wonderful polonaise. So let me give you a rough idea of this. This is also, I have to tell you, a vivid childhood memory, because my first piano teacher, and remember, he was the one who told my mother that she was wasting her money. Luckily, she didn't listen to him, so we did end up playing the piano. But after every one of those student recitals that some of you have experienced, or were very nervous, the reward was that this piano teacher would get up and play the Chopin Polonaise. And I remember thinking when I was a little girl, oh, one day I hope I can play that piece. And I finally did learn it, because it's such a special piece, and it's fun for me to be able to share it with you. And there you have an old favorite, the heroic Polonaise. You know, I would have loved to have heard Liszt play this piece because I think he would have brought out that bravura and virtuosity. Chopin was a very different performer than Liszt. In fact, Chopin made his living mainly as a piano teacher for the daughters of the wealthy aristocracy. That's the way he could dress as elegantly as he did. And also he was a very good businessman when it came to his publishing. So he did not do the touring, say, that a Liszt did. Liszt was so happy playing for thousands and thousands of people in the huge concert halls. And in a way, we can say, of course, Liszt was an extrovert. And Chopin was really a very private person. He was more of the introvert. And he was happiest playing in the small salons of the wealthy aristocracy who lived in Paris. So, and because he was of a very fragile nature. Since his childhood, he had been plagued by respiratory problems, so he did not have a big sound. So the few occasions where he did play in a concert hall, people said you couldn't even hear him on the last row. So his comfort zone was really in a large living room in somebody's home, and that really suited his style very well. Now, Liszt and Chopin had, of course, a friendship, but they went together sometimes like oil and water. Of course, Chopin was the first to say, oh, Liszt could play my etudes better than anybody. I envy the way Liszt plays my etudes. And Liszt had such a respect for Chopin's genius and his individuality and what he brought to the piano. But Chopin did not have any respect for Liszt's music. In fact, he couldn't abide it. So this is the friendship that they had. But of course, Liszt recognized the genius, and they coexisted because they were part of the same society there. And before I leave you today, I'd like to play for you a composition that I imagine Chopin must have played, and of course I think every time he played this, he must have played it differently. And it's one of my favorites. It's one of his most beautiful nocturnes, in my opinion, the D-flat. I've recorded all of them, and this is still my favorite. And I have to say, Chopin loved the night. He loved its mysteries, and he creates this wonderful atmosphere. You can see what I'm talking about his pedaling, because he uses a lot of wonderful pedal colors in this piece. And it's a very personal and very intimate statement. And I think also at this time in our lives, we need to hear more of this beautiful Chopin music. So here is his D-flat nocturne. And now you can understand why everybody loves Chopin. And they love his heart and his soul. And we are so grateful for what he has left us pianists. And I promise you that I will do another program about Chopin because I've just tapped the surface by giving you some of my old favorites. But there are so many wonderful compositions I want to share with you on these programs. So in the meantime, please keep well and stay safe. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.